Hello and welcome to GCSE English Unlocked, your guide to unlocking the secrets behind GCSE English Language and Literature. Whether you're struggling with Shakespeare, in a quandary over your quotations, or getting in a puzzle over your persuasive writing, this podcast has got you covered. So grab a pen, sit down and get ready to unlock the secrets of GCSE English. Hello and welcome to another episode of GCSE English Unlocked. It's me, your host, Mrs. Dixon, and I've got my special guest again, Mr. Suttle, and today we are talking about how I answer my English Language Paper 2 exam.
And it's exciting times down here at Preston because it's mock exam week and our Year 11 students are going to be facing their Language Paper 2 exam on Wednesday.
Next week.
Here, that's just a scarer for everybody. I wanted to put a bit of fear into everybody and to reassure you all I know what I'm doing. So English Language Paper 2, what does it look like? What's the difference between this and Language Paper 1?
English Language Paper 2, some people are put off by this one, some people think it's the hard paper, but in some ways there's lots to do, there's lots to read, but most importantly there's lots to say. So it's different because you've got to read two sources. What else is different?
So the questions come, well, in many ways it's very similar because there's 4 reading questions followed by a creative writing question, and in this case it's persuasive writing. What you have to do in each question differs slightly from paper 1, but we're going to go through that question by question. We're sure by the end that you guys are going to be experts on this, and whether you're using this before your mock exams or whether you're using this before real exams, you are going to feel confident and prepared going into your paper.
Yeah, so you've got two sources this time. They're both non-fiction, so that means they're factual. So often they're taken from diaries, letters, travel books they love as well.
One will always be, relatively speaking, modern, and one will always be a 19th century text. So there's a lovely link here to your English literature, doing your 19th century text, A Christmas Carol, or other 19th century texts are available. Will stand you in really good stead to understand the language requirements. Okay, so do you want to talk us through how long we ought to spend on each question? And tell us how long is the paper in total? So the paper is 1 hour and 45 minutes long. So I'm going to give some rough suggestions for how long I would spend on each question. This is what I tell my students. These are open to debate. But question 1, I would be spending no longer than 5 minutes. Question 2, I'd be spending absolute maximum 10 minutes. Question 2 is one which is easy to get carried away on. Remember, it's only worth 8 marks. We'll come to that in a bit, but don't spend lots of minutes on relatively few marks. Question 3, I would spend between 10 and 15 minutes. Question 4, I would make certain you give at least 20 minutes. And question 5, 45 minutes. Now, the way I speak to my students about this, I see your minutes as being like money, and you have to decide where are you going to spend your minutes, and you have to think about what you're going to get in return. So just like you wouldn't spend lots of money and not get very much in return, you need to make certain if you're spending lots and lots of minutes, you're spending them on the questions where lots and lots of marks are available. Yeah, and I'll just add to that, Sarah, is that the feedback we have from last year is that question 4 is the neglected question. So students don't always do very well on this question, or paper 1 as well. And this is because I think it comes, and we're going to talk about timings in a minute, and order and timings in a minute, because it comes near the end of section A. People are so desperate to get on the writing, they speed through question 4 and they don't give it enough time. So please don't neglect question 4. And question 4 is worth so many marks. We're obviously, setting high expectations, and we're looking at doing as well as we can in this. But if you write a very good question 5 and back that up with a very good question 4, you will already have achieved enough marks you will need to pass this paper. And then everything you do in questions 3, questions 2 and questions 1 will just be elevating your grade to one of those 7s, 8s and 9s. If I had £1 for every time students have missed out on a grade they felt they probably should have deserved because they did not spend enough time on question 4, then, I wouldn't be having to do podcasts here at Preston School. I'd be living in my massive villa with my bling cars.
Okay, so we're going to move on to now reading the paper.
So those mathematicians will have noticed that those timings I gave, if you add them up, they would come to either 1 hour and 30 minutes or 1 hour and 35 minutes. This paper's 1 hour and 45 minutes. So that leaves you between 10 and 15 minutes to use for reading the paper. Of course, that depends upon you having a very good close reading of each source, I would say, before attempting any of the questions. What would you say, Miss?
So I agree, sir, with you entirely, but I think on the second reading, and I think, sir, that you've probably agreed here from what I can see from your notes, is that as you read the second time, you can grab some freebies. So we know question 4 asks us about perspectives. As you read the second time, maybe label some quotes that link to perspective, maybe jot down disapproving or jot down celebratory to talk about the writer's perspective.
That's a great idea, and that will set you in such good stead for later on. Yeah.
Okay, so one hotly debated thing is order, and I know me and Mr. Suttle are going to butt heads on this. My view for order is do question 5 first if you feel comfortable with that. If you would prefer to do it all in order and do question 5 last, then you do you. I think it's a personal choice, and I think you must time yourself and do it in the order that you'd like. This is why doing practice papers and mock exams is so important. If you do question 5 first, I then think you need to go through it traditionally and do question 1, 2, 3 and 4, but I know Sir's gonna he's got something else up his sleeve to recommend, which I'm very disapproving of, but I'll allow him to say it anyway.
So I must hasten to add, this is my opinion, and although I am incredibly smart and knowledgeable and fantastic at all things English language related, this is just one way of looking at it. I would say you must do question 5 first. In fact, I go as far as telling my class that if they don't do question 5 first, I will fine them, I will get their exam script, I will roll it up, and I will shove it up their nostrils sideways.
That's extreme, and I didn't think you were going to say nostrils.
Well, thank goodness I did. I think question 5 is the make or break question here. You want to guarantee you spend 45 minutes on 40 marks whilst your brain is fresh, and the worst thing that could possibly happen is leave it till last and suddenly you've spent a little too long on all those reading questions and you only have 30 minutes left to try and tap into that huge bank of marks. It might lead to you rushing it. Whatever happens, it won't be as fresh and as fantastic as you do it first. Then, and this is where we're going to get really wacky, I would be doing the reading questions in a particular order as well. So, I can see Miss wincing as I suggest this.
I'm wincing.
I would kick off with question 1 first. Get those lovely, easy 4 marks. Then, I would jump and I'd do question 3. Question 3 is language analysis. You guys are great at it. You do it in all of your English literature questions. You do it in a substantial amount of the English language paper 1 question. So, it is our bread and butter skill. Here at Preston, you guys are great analysers of language. So I would tap into those marks. Secondly, you are warming up for question 4. So having done question 3, I would then do question 4 next. You are able to perhaps reuse, perhaps even rewrite some of the same ideas about the same quotes that you wrote about in question 3 whilst they're still fresh in your mind. But most importantly, you are not at risk of running out of time on question 4, which was something we talked about earlier as being a threat. And then finally, I would do question 2 last of all. Again, if I had £1 for every time I've seen students do this in order, they've done their question 1, then they've hit question 2, which is the big first writing question, and they know they need to write about 2 sources, and they suddenly sink a huge amount of time on question 2 for what's relatively few marks compared to the other questions. Question 2 is a curveball question that can cost you a lot of time if you're not careful. So I would save question 2 till last.
If you want to follow Sir's zany, wacky idea, then that's absolutely your prerogative. What I would say, and I do think we will agree on this is exactly what mocks are for. If you like the sound of Sir's idea, why not try it in the mock? See if it works for you. If it doesn't work, fine. Try a past paper. Try my method. You need to work out which is the best method for you. But I think something we can definitely agree on is that question 4 and 5. You cannot neglect them. You must give them the time and energy that they deserve in order to pick up those all-important marks. It's a really tight paper as well, isn't it, Sir? So you can change grades from gleaning just a few marks here and there. The boundaries are usually quite tight.
Yes, no, absolutely. But I reiterate what Miss says. If you're listening to this before the real life exams, if it's now May and you're listening to this, definitely don't go and try something new. Try something tried and tested. Try what your teachers reinforced with you. Everyone has different ways to come to things.
Okay, so we're going to skip out question 1, sir, do you think? Or just give a really brief overview of it?
Yeah, let's have a real brief overview. I mean, question 1, you've got to find 4 true statements out of a possible... Well, they give you 8 statements, 4 are true, and you've got to identify the 4 true statements. I think this is just a case about reading carefully. There'll be a few statements designed to catch out people who are skimming. So I would just double check, go through, check you've got 4.
So let's have a look at question 2. 10 minutes on this one?
I would say about 10 minutes, yes. So
now I will say, if you want to have a go at this, I've put a mini mock in the comments or in the podcast notes. So question 2, I call the mini comparison. You have to find the difference in source A and source B between whatever is stated in the question. So the example we've got here, this is called Winter in America, this paper. Write a summary of the differences between the effects of the winter weather in the US.
And just to clarify too, they have reworded this question in exam slightly. So the word summary won't be in your summer exam. They will use the word what can you infer about 2 topics. But what the requirements are the same as they've always been. The marks for this question come from inference and they come from comparison. Is that right, Miss?
It is right, it is. And I have to say that having marked this paper, I think the real marks on this question is from the inferences. So if you can write a smart, clever, interesting, extended inference about your quotes, then that is where you're going to be a winner. What do we mean by an inference?
So the example I use in my class is I might say Jimmy has received 100 negative logs since September. What can we infer about Jimmy? So we explicitly know that he's got 100 logs. We have to try and work something out about him based upon that information. And what we can work out is the inference. So go on, Miss, give that one a go. Infer something about Jimmy for me.
I'd say Jimmy would be one that I probably wouldn't be looking to put in my class the next year.
So, Miss has given me, I would say, a semi-interesting inference there. So, you could easily say I can infer Jimmy is naughty. I can infer I wouldn't want to be Jimmy's teacher. To get top marks, you want to try and find something more interesting. So I would perhaps suggest, perhaps Jimmy lives quite far away from school and there are poor public transport links to school. And perhaps all his negative marks are coming from being late. So that would be a more interesting inference than simply stating Jimmy is naughty. OK,
I've got a more sympathetic one, sir. Perhaps we could say that Jimmy perhaps has some issues going on at home that's making him act out in school. Is that more the sort of thing? That
would be a really good inference. And for top grade, you could give multiple inferences. So you could say perhaps Jimmy lives far away and has difficulty getting to school. However, it could be the case that he has problems at home.
OK, sir. So let's practice then with our example text. I'm going to read the quote and then let's come up with some interesting inferences that a student might make. So the question is, what can you infer about the differences between the effects of winter weather in the US? So I'm just going to pick out a quote here. Don't worry if you haven't read the extract. Every branch, blade and trunk is coated with frozen rain so that you can touch nothing truly.
So I'd be inferring from that how cold and uncomfortable it is that you'd have to go out well prepared wearing gloves, or else you're going to be feeling these extreme effects of cold weather.
Anything else I might add to that, I might say perhaps, this is uncomfortable and inconvenient and frighteningly cold. However, it also suggests that it's probably quite pretty. We've got the branch, the blades and the trunk, they're all coated with frozen rain. And actually the text goes on to say the spikes of the pines are sunk into pear-shaped crystals. So you might notice that we can infer that the writer's getting at a sense that it's cold and horrible and extreme conditions, but there's like a beauty to it as well. I've thought about my inferences. How would I write this up into an answer in my 10 minutes?
So I use a structure of my classes, which is PQI, which stands for point, quote, inference, point, quote, inference.
But what I would say to do, I completely agree, I use PQI as well, but think to yourself PQIII, so you extend those inferences.
That's a brilliant idea. So having written my point, quote, inference about source A, I would then write my point, quote, inference about source B, except when I make my point and say what I explicitly know about the topic, what they are directly telling me, I would add just a little sentence to explain why this is similar or different to source A before I go into my quote and my inference.
So yeah, you want to keep synthesizing and linking the two together. And again, I really do think my most important bit of advice is the interesting inferences. I think you can maybe use one or two quotes in this answer, probably two, so you've got the comparison. And if you wrote really great inferences about those two quotes, you could get really high marks. So please don't underestimate the inferences and don't be afraid to have a go.
And the final thing I'd say is this is the only time in the reading section of paper 2 where you do not need to do language analysis. So you don't need to explain why the key words in your quote allow you to make those inferences. You're allowed this time to just dive in and make those inferences without that explanation.
And you don't need to look for metaphors, similes, language techniques. It's not assessing AO2. So don't worry about any of that stuff. That comes next for question 3, which is the language analysis.
So, should we dive into question 3, Miss?
Let's dive into question 3. I don't think this one will take too long because you guys are so used to doing this. We do it all the time and you've done it for paper 1.
So this is identical to question 2 in paper 1, and it will even start with exactly the same wording in the question. You will see the words, how does the writer use language to describe ... and they will specify a specific topic.
And in our example, it is the snow. And am I right in thinking, so it's always source B, or usually they ask for this, or do they switch between the two?
I'm not 100% certain, but just double check you are writing about the source they ask in the question. You know, if they say, read source B, how does the writer present the snow? Don't be that person who writes about source A. I would... if I were taking this exam, I'd be reading the question carefully. They will refer to a specific part of the source they want you to read. So it will say something like, read lines 18 to 25. How does the writer use language to? I'd read that section with highlighter in hand, and I would highlight every sentence or every quote I came across which focused on that topic. What I'd then do is go back and look at those quotes I'd highlight, and I'd circle interesting words. And I would look at the sentence that I had highlighted with the most circles on, because that would suggest I'd found the quote which I could probably write the most about.
Yeah, I think one big error that students make is looking for a simile, looking for a metaphor, and then they find a simile, but they don't really have much to say about it, and they think there's some security in saying, I know this is a simile. But actually, again, you would get higher marks on this question if you didn't write about anything about similes, metaphors, and you just wrote something interesting about the language. Ideally, yes, look for similes, look for metaphors. If you can mention that's what they are, that's brilliant. But Sir's absolutely right. You need to be picking up those interesting words that you can say a lot about. So really, if I could summarise doing well in English, it would be saying something interesting about the language. Don't be shy.
And 2 ways you can say something interesting. You could talk about imagery, which sounds very fancy, but really all you're explaining there is what do the words or what does that quote let you imagine, and why might the writer want to make you imagine the topic in that particular way. Alternatively, you can talk about connotations. If there's an interesting word, what does that word link to? What does that word make you think of? And how could that shape what the writer's trying to say about the topic?
Yeah, so you've just unlocked 2 secret methods there. Imagery, if you've got a really nice quote but you're not sure if it's a simile, you're not sure if it's a metaphor, call it imagery if it's a bit of descriptive writing, or connotations. Those are 2 secret methods that always work.
And, I would be using what, how, why here. What is the writer saying about the topic? What is the quote that tells us that? How do the methods, how do the words in that quote get the writer's point of view on this topic across? And why might the writer be holding these ideas, or why might they want us to share these ideas?
Just a last final top tip. A nice way to get the higher marks in this question is to look for patterns in the language. So what I mean by that is looking for words that link together that you think, and they usually will choose something that has a pattern in the language. So for example, if we were analysing source B, there's lots of language related to devastation and the trauma, the damage, the impact of the storm. So I might label all of those and say, I would say the motif of damage and devastation highlights how powerful the storm was, or something like that.
Brilliant.
Happy, sir, with question 3?
Happy with question 3.
Right, we're going to go on to question 4 now. Now, if you're going to listen at all, listen now, because remember, question 4 is our forgotten question, and Preston students this year are going to absolutely smash question 4. It is going to be the one where they pick up those all-important marks that's going to get you over that grade boundary. So tell us, what happens for question 4?
So question 4 is really, it's like you are layering on all the skills in the previous 2 questions that have gone. So question 2, you needed to do comparison and inference. Question 3, you needed to do language analysis. Question 4, you are spinning all those plates together. So you need to read both sources, and you are asked to compare the writer's feelings or viewpoints about a particular topic. So you have to explain, how does the writer in source A feel about a particular topic? How does the language they use convey that feeling and that opinion to you? What can you infer about their feelings and their opinions based upon what they've said about the topic? And then you need to do that again about source B.
Yeah, so the most important word here is feeling. So the question is phrased, compare how the writers convey their attitudes towards winter weather, for example, in our exam. But really, it's just asking, what do they think and feel about each one?
I would start off with a nice topic sentence that sums up both the writer's perspectives.
And sorry, sir, to interrupt. I just want to remind you guys about the paper 2 booklet that we gave you and that you studied hard in term 1, because that had a page which had a whole list of synonyms that you could use to describe attitudes and feelings. So instead of saying he feels positive or negative, they are banned, aren't they, sir? Positive and negative.
100% banned. Don't be that person who says the writer of source A feels positive about ... The examiner will have read about 1 million scripts where they've done that, and they will pigeonhole you into the, I don't know what category they'll pigeonhole you, but they will.
Yeah, so I'll display it on the screen now. If you're watching on YouTube, have a look at the list of words you could use for attitudes and feelings. Now, another tip, and I don't know if Sir would agree with me, is to use initially and ultimately, because oftentimes they'll try and see if more able candidates can pick up the marks by there being a subtle shift in attitudes as the text goes on. So initially it may seem that the writer is, for example, scared and nervous. So you might remember in class we did the being buried alive one. Initially the writer was very frightened and scared and quite panicked about the concept of being buried alive, but ultimately by the end he felt quite enlightened and reborn, for example.
Yes, I love that use of initially and ultimately. That's something new to my sort of skill set of teaching question 4 since joining here at Preston, and I've been using it lots and lots. I think that's a great way. So a nice topic sentence, explain how the writer is feeling in each source, ideally showing if their feelings shift at all throughout the source. And then you need to set about proving what you've said in your topic sentence. So you need a what, how, why paragraph, just like you did in question 3 about source A. And then you'll need a what, how, why paragraph to prove what you've said in your topic sentence about source B. But Miss, where would you put comparison into this rather than writing 2 separate what, how, why paragraphs that are very standalone?
So I think ideally, and again I don't know if you'll agree with me on this, is to keep switching back between the 2 texts and constantly trying to find links between the 2 texts. And if you can get down to word level comparison, then you're really flying. So in source A, the writer chooses the adverb miraculously to describe how the fence post is covered in the metaphor diamond, so I guess like frozen droplets. Whereas in source B he uses the word devastation to talk about the effect of the storm. So comparing at word level analysis I think is really impactful. So what, as a very long answer to Sir's question, is ideally I would keep switching from source A to B, finding connections and links all the time.
And the phrase I like to use is see if you can find a same but different. So do they do something similarly but for different reasons? Do they perhaps both use metaphors, but one uses it to make winter seem beautiful and pleasant, and the other one uses metaphors to make winter seem dangerous and deadly? Or do they do something, do they have perhaps a similar viewpoint, but they go about it in different ways? So perhaps they might both say that winter can be unpleasant and uncomfortable, but one uses adjectives and the other uses powerful verbs. So it's that same but different is a nice way to really get skilled higher level comparisons.
To finish off, Son, I hate this question from students, but I do feel like it makes them feel secure. How much do they need to write? So for paper 1, question 2, how many paragraphs would you recommend?
I don't know if this is going to be the answer you're looking for, miss, but I go back to timings and I say as much as you can in those time limits that we talked about at the beginning. So for question 2, I said 10 minutes. So I would be saying you should write as much as you can in that 10 minutes.
And for you guys that I know it won't satisfy, because I know it won't satisfy some of you, I'm going to suggest 2 paragraphs, but in each paragraph you must talk about source A twice and source B twice.
I think, often, and this applies for questions 2, 3 and 4, the mark scheme for the higher level marks wants you to talk about a range of quotations, and a range means more than one. So whether you do a quote per paragraph or whether you have a more detailed paragraph where you might use quotes to reinforce what you're saying, I think it's that idea of talking about multiple quotations.
And I know you're going to say the same for question 3, isn't it? And I have to say that the examiner doesn't give a stuff about how many paragraphs you write. If you write one big paragraph, they'll be annoyed. But as long as it's not section 5, paper 2, question 5, or paper 1, question 5, you're not going to lose marks. Again, question 3, I'd go for 3 paragraphs?
I think so, because 3 will guarantee you probably 3 quotes. So again, you're going to be able to reinforce what you're saying there. You're going to be ticking off that requirement for a range of textual references.
And question 4?
Question 4, so again, if you can try and say talk about at least 2 quotations for each source, so that could be a topic sentence, perhaps 2 paragraphs about source A, 2 paragraphs about source B. Whether you are jumping between the 2 sources like Miss recommended to make that comparison very evident, that's what I'd be aiming for.
Okay, we've hit the half-hour mark there, so we're going to wrap up shortly. Do you have any words of encouragement, sir, for our Preston students or anyone else listening at any other schools doing a mock exam, going into the real thing, or anyone who's just struggling with English language paper 2?
I would say that huge amounts of the marks available here are language analysis, which is everyone's bread and butter. Everyone here is doing this left, right and centre in both your English language GCSEs, so just do what you know.
And I think for my point, I'm going to go with question 4, the forgotten question. Don't let it be the forgotten question. Give poor question 4 some love.
Right, good luck guys, whether you're Preston students or whether you're listening to this in the wider world. Good luck.
We believe in you.